Senator John Cornyn introduced a new piece of legislation. Well, it's not necessarily a new piece of legislation, but filed a piece of legislation. National Reciprocity Bill in the Senate. Filed that last week. Here to talk about that bill and get his share his thoughts on it, the president and founder of the United States Concealed Carry Association. It's Tim Schmidt. Tim, good morning. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Chad. I'm super excited to be here today.
Well, glad to have you on the program. First, tell the audience a little bit about your organization and where you guys come down on the on Senator Cornyn's bill that he filed last week.
Yeah, sure. So the USCCA, I started this organization in 2003, and we've got over 200,000 members all across the country, a whole bunch of them in Texas, of course.
Right.
And what we do is, we provide education training, but the main thing is self-defense insurance for responsible gun owners. And I got to tell you, this new bill from Senator Cornyn is a breath of fresh air, because can you imagine what it's like being a responsibly armed citizen with a concealed carry permit, and every time you travel out of the state, you have to literally research and find out, okay, what states changed their laws again, and where can I go and where can't I go? So this is just going to be fantastic for responsible gun owners.
What do you think as far as momentum is? I mean, we've obviously Republicans have the White House, they've got the House and the Senate. Where do you think the momentum is behind some of this bill? Do you think it's there to actually become law?
I think so. I think there's going to be, I believe the Senate bill is going to require 8 Democrats to get behind it. And so that, in general, typically Democrats don't like stuff like this. But I think that they've learned even over the last 8 years that man, the United States, you don't mess with gun control, because, the more gun control you sponsor, the more upset your constituents get. So I really think that this is going to happen, especially when you look at this, Chad, and just realize how much sense it makes. I mean, we're talking about these are the most the entire country, and yeah, it makes sense.
What are and when it comes to gun issues like this, I always try to think of what are real arguments, and forget about the emotional arguments, which is what the left has on some of this. It's emotional. It's we don't like guns. If you have someone who is quote unquote a responsible gun owner, who knows, the gun could go off by itself. Those are the emotions that you get from some of those on the left. But where do some of these states come down? Because I know there are some states that do allow their citizens to get a license, but they may not recognize Texas, or they may not recognize Oklahoma. They may not recognize some of these other states. Is it an issue of the tests that are done? What's the problem there?
Well, so I mean, this is a very complex question. So right now, there's 29 states that have what's called shall issue permits. That means if a citizen who's not a felon in their state goes through the requirements, then they will be issued a permit. Now, the remaining states, they have how may issue, and ultimately what that means is that the governing body in that state is they're pretty much going to say, unless you're a movie star or unless you're a high-powered politician, unless you have a really good reason, then no, we're not going to recognize your natural-born right to self-protection. So. And every single one of these states has a completely different list of, well, we recognize this state, we recognize this state, we don't recognize this state. And on top of that, they're always changing. And so to your point about the difference of the test, that's another point. Every single state has different requirements, but quite frankly, every single state has different requirements for driver's licenses, and there's no problem with that.
Right. The only thing, and I was talking about this with my producer before we came on the air, and again, I try to look at what's the next step, especially when it comes to legislation like this. Where can the federal government screw people over? And the only thing that I can think of that and I don't know if y'all have given any thought to this or not, could this lead at some point to a national concealed carry license, or something where the federal government comes in, because Democrats would probably love to do this one day, where the left comes in and says, okay, we're going to have this, but we need to have one type of test. We need to know who's registered. We need to know all of this. Does it centralize it too much, or is that something that people aren't too worried about?
All right, Chad. So that's a very good point. That is a slippery slope that we cannot risk going down, because that's exactly what they'll want to do. They will want to make that national testing, but ultimately what these bills are talking about, they're requiring the states to get along. They're not telling the states in any way how to do the testing. They can still do it their own way, which is exactly what we want. That creates like a free market process within our country in terms of within the states doing the concealed carry testing. But your point's very valid, but I don't believe that these bills are taking a step down that slippery slope.
Yeah, I hope not. I hope it's just one of those things. Again, when I look at gun issues like this, I don't buy into the emotional stuff. It's just you always have to worry about the federal government when it comes to the Second Amendment, in my opinion, and hopefully they won't go down that road if this bill actually makes its way. Which again, you got to get some Democrats on board in the Senate, and that's going to be tricky to do. Tim, tell folks where they can get more information, not only about this piece of legislation, but what you guys are doing over at the United States Concealed Carry Association.
Sure. The easiest thing would just be to go to USCCA.com, and we've got all sorts of free information and training and articles, and it's just a great resource for responsibly armed citizens.
Excellent. Tim Schmidt, founder and president of the United States Concealed Carry Association. Appreciate your time, Tim, and I'm sure we'll talk again in the future.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chad.
Thank you.